propose, because there are quite a lot of questions in Slido, to immediately start with the question which is popping up on the screen. And the question is, we are coordinating a doctoral network. Are we allowed to ask from beneficiaries that they contribute some amount of their management budget to the cost of a project manager, which will be based at the coordinating partner? What happens if one partner refuses to contribute to this?
I can try to reply to this one. Thank you, Michaela. Indeed, normally, this is your internal arrangement within the consortium, and this discussion should be also reflected in your consortium agreement, which will have to be submitted by month 2 of the project. So in general, what we see in doctoral networks is indeed that the coordinating institution usually asks for a percentage of the management budget of other beneficiaries to contribute to the salary of a project manager. So this is a regular practice, and it should be agreed within the consortium. But again, this should be internal discussion and internal arrangement. And obviously, we highly encourage you to appoint a project manager that he will help you a lot for all reporting and making sure that you fulfill all MSCA requirements.
And just to complement, if one partner refuses to contribute to this, you should also have a mechanism for that in your consortium agreement. So it's really internal business, and we don't really interfere on this. So we'll talk now the next question. Does the official signature still include the EU flag? And if yes, how to deal with unwillingness of journals to include figures in the acknowledgement section? Julien, I see you're nodding your head. Would you like to take that one?
Yes, I can take this one. So you do not have to put the EU flag into publications. In the publications, you have to acknowledge the funding. There's a standard sentence for that, so you need to acknowledge the funding and the project number, but you do not need to put the EU flag on publications.
Thank you. I will take the next question. So the DCs need to perform secondments, but the living costs differ a lot. DCs paid with a salary from a low coefficient country will struggle to have the mobilities to more expensive countries. Mobility allowance does not suffice for this, or it is not for the purpose of it. How to handle it? So I will reply to this question. So the mobility allowance, as we said at the beginning, is for the personal cost of the researcher, and the mobility allowance shouldn't cover the cost of the secondments. And all travel and accommodation of secondments costs need to be, which are less or equal to 6 months, need to be covered with the institutional cost of the recruiting beneficiary. So this is very important, and we do realize that sometimes it's quite difficult for a researcher to move and to do a secondment in a country with a higher country correction coefficient, but by covering his expenses, travel and accommodation, this usually helps quite a lot, and leaving his mobility for his own personal costs. Yes, maybe, and Julia would like to add something, yes?
Yes, just to be sure that everybody understands it, the mobility allowance should be paid throughout the duration of the fellow's contract. So mobility allowance is not just when they go on secondment, it should be paid every month. So that accounts for the fact that the fellow had to move in order to take their employment contract as a doctoral candidate, and that mobility allowance is supposed to pay for the extra cost of living that is related to just going to a different country to work. So every month they should have it, and not only when they go on secondments.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this very, very important clarification. Okay, let's move on to the next question. What costs are reviewed if an audit? Will the cost charged to the project in the accounting system be reviewed even though it is flat rates? So I can actually try to reply to this question. So the costs that will be reviewed are the implemented costs, and the ones which you will declare at the end of each reporting period based on the person months which will be implemented by the recruited doctoral candidates. And what the auditors will check is that the living allowance, the mobility allowance, which was just mentioned by Julien, and the family allowance, if applicable, have really been actually paid. They were actually complied with the minimum MSCA requirements and the minimum MSCA allowances, that the correct country correction coefficients were actually applied, and that in case there is a long-term sick leave or a special needs allowance which is granted to the doctoral candidate, they will also verify that those have indeed been paid to the doctoral candidates. And of course, even though they are flat rates, they will of course verify the payment. So you need to keep proof that you actually paid the doctoral candidates. I don't know if you want to add something?
Maybe just something about the eligibility of the fellows. In case of an audit, the auditors will also check that all the recruited doctoral candidates were eligible, so fulfilling the mobility rule and other MSCA requirements, so not having a PhD before the recruitment. Yes, that's it. And also the recruitment process, if it was an open, fair and transparent recruitment process as well.
Yes, thank you very much for this clarification. I will also send you, once we have, we will provide you with the written replies after the event with the link to the guidelines on which documents you need to keep in case of an audit. We will now move to the next question. So are there any rules that you plan to implement to bring transparency to the management costs that are kept from the coordinators? At the moment, this is not regulated. A dedicated management budget for the coordinator would solve this issue.
I can try to reply. Okay. So this may not be an answer for now. This is an interesting comment. But at the moment, no, indeed, there is no specific rule that regulates the use of the management cost, which is a flat rate unit cost. And usually this is distributed according to your internal discussion and internal arrangement that can be reflected also in your consortium agreement. So this is something that the consortium should decide, and we don't interfere in this distribution of the management budget. But indeed, this is a useful comment also for any future discussion if you want to further improve the program in the future.
Thank you very much, Audrey. Okay, so the next question is, how should the justification for budget item B1 be prepared when the consortium, through a consortium agreement, has decided to allocate part of the budget, as granted in the grant agreement, to the coordinator? I will reply to this question. So as I said before, the institutional costs B1 and B2 are not audited. You need, of course, to make sure that you justify that the budget was used for the purposes of the project in accordance with what you described in the description of action. Now, for the rest, and as Audrey has said, it's up to you to decide in your consortium agreement how you will manage and distribute this budget between the beneficiaries, depending on the needs, the research training needs, and of course the agreement which was initiated at the beginning of the project. Are secondment agreements mandatory, or is the consortium agreement sufficient?
I can try to reply. So to my knowledge, we don't ask for secondment agreement per se. This can be, of course, reflected in your consortium agreement if the consortium deems it necessary. Good practice is in general to have a kind of agreement on the secondments at consortium level, but also when discussing with the doctoral candidates when they are recruited. But from our side, this is not something that we are asking for.
Yes, and if I can complement on that, I mean, sometimes secondments are carried out at the level of associated partners. And as you know, associated partners are not signatories of the grant agreement. So sometimes, I mean, it might be interesting also to include those associated partners in the consortium agreement, or because they're hosting secondments, to have a bilateral agreement with them where you would also cover some of their costs, because of course those associated partners will have costs. But it's up to you to decide, and this needs to be defined in the consortium agreement. So the next question is, before the DCs are recruited, can the budget be used for the researchers based on the beneficiaries for traveling to project meetings? Julien?
Well, I mean, the budget is used to implement the project. Now, if the DCs are not recruited, this budget was not designed for PIs or supervisors to travel to project meetings if it has nothing to do with the doctoral network that you're going to implement. So I would say it depends a bit on the context and the reason for traveling to project meeting. If it's project meeting to decide on aspects related to the doctoral network as such, this, yes, could be used. If it's to travel to the conference, no.
Thank you, Julien. So, for example, the kickoff meeting would be fine.